Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of all 4 episodes of Marvel's Zombies. I really enjoyed this What If spinoff directed by Brian Andrews and written by Zeb Wells as an effectively creepy and very gory tale of zombie survival and witchcraft, and one with surprising cosmic implications for our mother, Wanda Maximoff, now that Elizabeth Olsen has returned to voice the character for this. So let's break this whole story down, episode by episode, scene by scene, for all the Easter eggs and animation details and MCU connections that you might have missed. And if you love stories of witchcraft and horrific bloodshed, you are gonna love our new channel, The Witching Hour, where every Wednesday starting October 1st, you'll see weekly video essays about classic horror films from Jessica Clemens, Gina Ippolito, and me. Subscribe to this channel now to join the coven. Episode 1. The Marvel animation title appears with the same animation brushstrokes as we saw in What If, but now some blood spatters on the letters. Marvel Zombies was rated TVMA and really leaned into that mature violence so that the blood and guts we see throughout the show are the proper shade of red and not that muted, dull, purplish color that it sometimes was in the What If Zombies episode from What If Season 1 that this spun off from. But it also means that YouTube content restrictions won't really let us show all of the gnarliest stuff in this breakdown, unfortunately, but you'll get the idea. The title of Marvel Zombies flashes on screen, white on black. It's a dramatic horror film approach, and in that audio mix, you can hear the whispers of the Scarlet Witch, the Queen of the Dead. So Marvel Zombies was originally a comic run by Robert Kirkman, but this Marvel Zombies series is a spin-off from the What If Season 1 episode in 2021, the 5th episode of that season, What If Zombies, which really follows an original story that's not like a one-to-one adaptation of the Kirkman story. In this alternate universe, when Hank Pym was looking for Janet Van Dyne in the quantum realm, Janet had contracted what the Watcher referred to as a quantum virus that corrupted her brain and causes a zombie virus to spread across America within a few hours, infecting even the Avengers. They try to contain that horde on the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, but they get overrun. But from that madness, Vision had rescued T'Challa and Scott Lang, doing some pretty horrible stuff to them. Then, when Bruce Banner returns to Earth to warn about Thanos and the events from the opening act of Avengers Infinity War, instead it ends up being a scramble where he has to get saved from zombie versions of Iron Man and Doctor Strange and Wong, with the help of Wasp, Spider-Man, the Cloak of Levitation, Happy Hogan, David Dastmalchian's character Kurt, Bucky, Sharon Carter, and Okoye. But en route to Camp Lehigh in search for a cure, they get infected one by one by zombified Avengers like Clint Barton Hawkeye and Steve Rogers Captain America. Yeah, the body count is very high, and I was pleased they seemed to keep that tradition going in this miniseries. And then at Camp Lehigh, they realize that Vision has been cutting off pieces of T'Challa and Scott to feed to Wanda Maximoff, but Vision's Mind Stone is releasing a frequency that keeps the nearby zombies at bay. So Okoye goes down, and then Bruce, turning into Hulk, stays behind to fight zombie Wanda while Peter, T'Challa, and Scott's head, plus the Cloak of Levitation, head to Wakanda to try to use the Mind Stone to try to generate a cure, but there they find the African kingdom overrun by zombie Thanos with 5 of the 6 Infinity Stones waiting for them. Now, we never saw what happened to Hulk at Camp Lehigh, but we do find out in a future episode of this miniseries. Meanwhile, zombie Wanda did return in future episodes of What If in Season 1, Episode 8 as the Guardians of the Multiverse fought Ultron Infinity in another dimension, and then she appears as one of the collections of Strange Supreme in the Season 2 finale. So with all of these appearances, and even the role Wanda plays in the What If immersive experience, has really made the Scarlet Witch something of a big bad in Marvel animation, and I love that. Our first shot of episode 1 shows the sunlight beaming through the leaves of Central Park and forms, look at that, a hexagon shape in the lens flare, setting up the twist at the end of the series that, like the hex over Westview and WandaVision, all realities could be illusory projections cast by Wanda. Hawkeye Kate Bishop, voiced by Haley Steinfeld, sinks an arrow into a zombie, and she's followed by Ironheart, Riri Williams, Dominique Thorne, and Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan, Iman Vellani, and this remote-piloted Mark 85 Iron Man armor that was worn by zombie Tony Stark when he went down in that What If episode. They later say that Riri stole it from the corpse after those survivors left. We saw in the Ironheart series how Riri likes to remote pilot her armor separate from her body, and by the way, there was an alternate universe version of Riri that showed up in What If Season 3. We learned in episode 2 that this is actually 5 years later after the events of that What If episode, which was set, of course, in 2018, right as Infinity War was beginning. Since the world essentially froze at that point, the versions of Kate, Riri, and Kamala were all before the things that happened to them in the Hawkeye, Ironheart, and Ms. Marvel Disney Plus series. But the circumstances of the zombie outbreak apparently forced them to level up into the superheroes that they were destined to become. And we see how Kamala already has her bangle from her grandmother / great-grandmother and already has the ability to cast hard light from the Noor dimension. This leafy, overgrown, quiet New York City seems to be inspired by the look of New York City in I Am Legend and the way Boston Boston looks in The Last of Us. In the glass of one building is an arrow. This is one of zombie Hawkeye's arrows, signaling to us that he is currently overseeing this street. In that What If episode, zombie Hawkeye was roaming the Grand Central Station, but he followed the survivors at Camp Lehigh along with zombie Cap. We see that bridge that leads to Grand Central Station, the same location where the Avengers ended the Battle of New York in 2012. Then a Quinjet crashes, a Model 36ST, Riri observes. These are the shield aircraft that the Avengers would use to get around in the earlier films. In addition to her bangle, Kamala has a patch on her sleeve of the winged sloth that she had all over her stuff in Ms. Marvel, also seen in her Sloth Baby Productions YouTube channel. She also wears the iconic red scarf from her family that she incorporated into her final costume at the end of the series. Whoever the shield agent was who swallowed the transmitter and piloted this Quinjet has blonde hair. Maybe it's supposed to be Martin Freeman's agent Everett Ross, or maybe it could be shield agent Leo Fitz. Make Agents of Shield canon, Marvel, do it! Zombie Hawkeye's arrow blows up that stuffed bear in the Mark 85 armor, and we learn that it is Friday operating it. The Irish-voiced Friday was Tony's AI during the events of Infinity War, and Irish actress Orla Brady will be playing a version of Friday in Vision Quest. Kate barely gets away from dodging the next arrow, and the one she parries at zombie Clint misses him by just as much. This shows us that zombified superheroes can still retain their physical skills and even learn and perfect their craft even after becoming zombified. He impressively angles a trick arrow off of a few surfaces even without seeing down the ally that they run down. The three live in the home of Eleanor Bishop, Kate's mother, played by Vera Farmiga in the 2021 Hawkeye series. Kate says her mom planned for everything, suggesting the money she made working for Wilson Fisk went to turning this home into a very sturdy compound. Kamala says,
maybe she just had a feeling. Like the one my nanny had that made her send me my bangle.
Huh. So in Ms. Marvel, we learn that these bangles can open rifts through time, inscribed with the words of the Sufi poet, "What you seek is seeking you." And maybe Kamala's nanny used this bangle to know what the future held and knew that there was no way for her to stop this upcoming zombie virus, but there was a way for her granddaughter potentially to stop it. Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't by the end of the series. Riri decodes that the subspace transmitter releases a transgalactic frequency and must have been shrunken using pin particles, part of what S.H.I.E.L.D. called Project Life Shot. So it tells us that separate from Hank Pym, S.H.I.E.L.D. just had their own supply of Pym particles wherever this base was. But did whatever was left of S.H.I.E.L.D. have Project Life Shot in the live action timeline during Infinity War? Could there have been, in the background of those events, some effort to reach out to the Nova Corps, but Xandar had already been wiped out by then? Actually, while we bring up that subject in episode 3, the animated timeline must be different enough that Thanos got the Power Stone without destroying all the Nova Corps if they're all there outside of Earth. They debate going to this base in Ohio, and Riri says,
"You can't eat hope."
True.
I mean, tell that to the zombies at Camp Lehigh, because they definitely get a few bites of Hope Van Dyne. Riri places their chances at survival at 5%, then at 20% if they take their armored car, but doesn't go much higher for Kate's trick arrow, maybe because, as we'll see later, yeah, it is just confetti. Kamala sees a photo of herself with the Khan family, her parents Yusuf and Muniba, and her brother Amir. Riri named this car the Uhura, named after Nichelle Nichols' character in Star Trek, and played by Gamora actress Zoe Saldana in the J.J. Abrams reboot series. Kamala says,
"Engage number 1.
Yeah, she's jumping to a later era, but she's doing an impression of Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard in The Next Generation. And I love that Iman Vellani and Patrick Stewart are technically two live-action MCU characters who have gotten the needle drop of Ron Wasserman's X-Men theme. A zombie Okoye finds the crash site in zombie Clint.
A gift from your queen. Become her hand. Become her scion.
Okoye was part of the group of survivors left at Camp Lehigh who faced zombie Wanda so the others could escape. Now we see what happened to her. So they find this mountain range with a big bite blasted out of it. This is part of Icarus's battles with zombie Carol Danvers. Blade Knight later explains this is the Valley of the Broken Gods, two beings of immense power unable to destroy each other. They drive into that lightning storm battle. Icarus's explosions have a yellow and blue glow to them. Those are the colors of his suit. They crash in an area that was flattened by the rubble of past battles between these two, which now surrounds these three women by a bunch of zombies. And then now they see the Eternal Icarus, which was Richard Madsen's character.
Zombie.
Negative. The being is inorganic and heavily damaged.
So the Eternals are cosmic synthezoids who were built by the Celestials to be caretakers of planets like Earth. But since Earth's population went way down in this zombie outbreak, that process probably would have led to Tiamat's emergence never happening. So now Icarus is just kind of left to fight one of the most cosmically powerful zombies. His opponent is zombie Carol Danvers. Now, normally Carol Danvers would not have returned to Earth until after she was summoned by Nick Fury's pager at the end of the the Infinity War film as the snap was happening. But maybe now Nick Fury summoned her to help with the zombie plague, and she ended up getting infected. But I do appreciate how Kamala does not seem to know who Carol is, despite the fact that in Ms. Marvel, she's a huge Carol Danvers fangirl, because in this timeline, a hero named Captain Marvel would not have been known to the Jersey City teenager. The trick arrow is just confetti, so zombie Carol fries Kate with an energy blast. Riri gets bitten on the arm and orders Friday to get Kamala out of there with the transmitter, but we don't see Riri fully turn, which I think does set up the twist at the end of episode 4. Instead, Kamala just runs from the explosion in this very fun long take, using her hard blade as a shield and stepping stones like she did in the Ms. Marvel series, until at the last second she is saved by a mystery stranger. But before she wakes up, she has a dream where Riri and Kate are sitting at a table drinking boba, the same corner where the final scene of episode 4 takes place, and another clue that that particular setup could be an illusion by the Queen of the Dead. Kamala wakes up next to Blade Knight. Blade is based on the likeness of Mahershala Ali, but voiced here by Todd Williams, clearly doing a Mahershala impression. In this universe, he becomes the Fist of Khonshu, the Egyptian moon deity from Moon Knight. Blade is the half-vampire daywalker Eric Brooks, played by Wesley Snipes in the older trilogy and in Deadpool and Wolverine, but cast as Mahershala Ali in the MCU, so far only appearing in the form of a brief vocal cameo in the Eternals post-credit scene. Meanwhile, his solo film has been endlessly delayed. As they head to Ohio, Blade Knight says that Khonshu's original avatar, referring to Mark Spector, played by Oscar Isaac, was lost in the zombie plague. So after that, Khonshu found Eric Brooks, Blade, instead, giving us Blade Knight. They arrive at the Ohio base, which is the North Institute. We never saw the North Institute in live action, but it was the base in the Black Widow film that Alexei Shostakov and Melina Vostokov were sent to infiltrate as spies working for Dreykov in the early 90s in Ohio. In that Black Widow film, we learned that the North Institute was where Hydra, posing as S.H.I.E.L.D., was really experimenting on mind control systems that were used in their Winter Soldier program. Later on, Melina perfected this technology and used it to mind control her pigs, and then gave it to Dreykov to control the Widow agents. Now, 5 years into the zombie apocalypse, Melina, Alexei, and Yelena, and the other liberated Widow agents have regrouped after the events of the Black Widow film, which were set in 2016, back at this Ohio North Institute. And Melina has applied that mind control technology to these zombies outside the base. Alexei, though, does reference her farm here.
She used to have pigs. The zombies ate them.
Florence Pugh voices Yelena, and David Harbour voices Lexi here, but Melina is voiced by Carrie Walgren. Melina uses the S.H.I.E.L.D. motherboard to determine that the transmitter is designed to contact the Nova Corps. That's the fleet and military police of Xandar that we saw in Guardians of the Galaxy. But she says that the Wakanda event created a barrier around the planet that stops any kind of communication frequencies. We're gonna see what that event was in episode 3, so they're gonna have to find some way to get to space in the zombie apocalypse. The horde of the Queen of the Dead arrives, though, commanded by Zombie Okoye, Zombie Clint, Zombie Steve Rogers, still just the top half of him after Bucky used the shield to cut him in half in What If, and now also Zombie Ava Starr Ghost and Zombie Emil Blonsky Abomination, meaning that holding cell that he was in She-Hulk, the zombie plague must have gotten there too. The horde charges, created a kind of Helm's Deep siege where Alexei rallies the widows with an impassioned speech. I love how even Kamala gets into it.
Stay in our sacred home?
Hell no!
Will we return the damned to their lonely graves?
Yeah, right, we will! Yes!
In the initial wave, Okoye orders Abomination to do a kind of cannonball special and chuck Captain America into the base. After Cap crawls into a vent, we see a whole bunch more landing after him, meaning Abomination must have kept throwing more and more of them on the roof. I just like the idea of a line forming at Abomination up on the hillside of zombies just waiting for their turn. For Alexei, the opportunity to face Captain America in any form is an epic duel he's been waiting his whole life for. I love the twist of him assuming Captain is in the vent above, when in fact he's in the vent below. There's a lot of great twists in this miniseries that I just gotta give Zeb Wells credit for. Kamala faces the zombies with Blade and Yelena. Bismillah is the Arabic phrase that roughly translates to "in the name of God." It's really what Kamala would say in the Ms. Marvel series as a blessing before jumping into action.
Bismillah.
Alexei struggles with the half cap tucked behind the shield and then gnawing at him until he's able to body slam the half zombie under his back and splat. We can't show you the full splat, but it's such a cool finishing move. Alexei fans his arms out while Cap's severed arms are splayed out over his shoulders like angel wings. Zombie Ava Starr phases into the base, using her teleportation skills to kill these other Widow agents: Samantha, Celeste, Ruta, Leia, Candace, and Helen. Melina stays behind, using her tablet to stop the horde at the last second. Okoye asks,
The dead, they follow you?
No, they follow science.
The MCU has suggested that all magic is really just science that has not been figured out yet. Okoye kills her with a vibranium spear, which cuts right through the blast door. I love how in the first episode, even though Blade Knight talks about Khonshu, we do not see Khonshu initially, and he's just implied to be an imaginary friend, but we do see instances of Blade's precognition, from knowing the Horde was there before the others knew, to being able to tell Yelena to duck as he sensed Avastar Ghost's approach, which tells us that Khonshu was there whispering in his ear, even though we couldn't see him. We see the duel from the trailers as Blade Knight ultimately gets Ghost with a no-look stab behind him, tricking her by looking in the other direction, which leads her to think that she can get him from behind. I also love how, due to his powers from Khonshu, parts of his costume are able to fade away and reappear when he needs them. Like for the duel, his cloak was gone in order to free up his arms and shoulders, but after, it returns. They flee the garage through the ramp as Abomination chases them. The way this underground bunker implodes reminds me of Nick Fury and Maria Hill's escape from the Project Pegasus base in 2012 Avengers. Yelena and Alexei mourn Milena. Yelena calls out, "Mama, Mama," and we are reminded of Yelena's emotional dinner table speech to the others in the Black Widow film, how to a young girl like she once was, those spies really were just a family to her. And in Thunderbolts, she still calls Alexei dad, and we see that father-daughter relationship in the next episode. Episode 2. This episode returns to Outbreak Day in San Francisco. The opening 3 minutes are another unbroken long take, which I will admit would be way more impressive in live action than in animation where you can make anything happen, but it's still very fun. Katie Chen, voiced by Awkwafina, joins Shang-Chi, Simu Liu, as they wear their red vested valet uniforms from their jobs at the Fairmont Hotel. Katie calls him Sean, and we see that name on his name badge because at this point, she still did not know his birth name or what his origins were in China. They're nearly run over by one of the city's iconic trolleys, which I'm choosing to see as a nod to the trolley problem thought experiment, which refers to the dilemma of how many and what kind of victims it's most moral to run over with a trolley. The driver of this trolley is the recurring character design of that San Francisco hipster with the goatee and the glasses that we saw on the Golden Gate Bridge in season 1, and actually earlier in this long take. Katie points up to the giant bugs on a building being eaten by a giant seagull. As we'll see later in the shot, the PIM lab is in chaos. It's because that's where Hank and Janet came out through the quantum tunnel, infected. So in the chaos of that lab being overrun, PIM particles must have started hitting all kinds of crap in the city, including people and zombies. Like there's this one businessman who's very confused as to why he's big, and then he gets bitten by a giant zombie. And a minute later in the sequence, that businessman shows back up, now himself zombified. Katie and Shang-Chi run into FBI agent Jimmy Woo, Randall Park voicing the character, who at this time in 2018 would have been in San Francisco trying to catch Scott Lang breaking his house arrest. But then in swoops a fleet of attack helicopters controlled by Wen Wu and the crime organization of the Ten Rings. I like how they fly in from the west, from the Golden Gate Bridge facing the ocean, as they would have been approaching San Francisco from the Pacific Ocean if they were coming from China. And pretty impressive how fast Wen Wu got there if he was coming all the way from the other continent. But like Kate's mother and Kamala's Nani, maybe these parents just have a way of seeing these things coming. Death Dealer joins him, that was Wen Wu's lieutenant and training master from the Shang-Chi film. 2018 would be before the events of the Shang-Chi film, so Shang-Chi would still be estranged from his father and would not yet have the 10 rings. But Shang-Chi gets bitten on the arm, and Wen Wu, as he does at the climax of that 2021 film, transfers his 10 rings to his son, one clamping around his upper arm like a tourniquet to stop the infection from spreading, the other 9 to be able to be used as weapons. So this shows us that some forms of magic can resist or even reverse the quantum virus, setting up Wanda's ability to do so. Ultimately, Shang-Chi will share some of these rings with Katie, because 2 operators of it is more useful than just one of them. In his dying words, Wen Wu tells the son to remember what his mother taught him, showing how the ultimate lesson of that 2021 film, that the peaceful teachings of Ta Lo that Shang-Chi's mother represented, are just as important for the son to carry as are the strengths of his father. A lesson that Wen Wu resisted throughout the movie was ultimately a lesson that he always knew to be true. Shang-Chi and Katie are able to escape with Jimmy Woo and Death Dealer and these other 3 randos, Rick, Denise, and Sandra. 5 years later, we're now in a Mad Max-esque post-apocalypse on these salt flats, as this band are road warriors and scavengers listening to Journey's Lights, which is a song with lyrics about the city of San Francisco where Journey was founded. They get chased by a band of Skrulls trying to steal their cows. Many of their cars already have purple blood on the grills, so they have mowed down some Skrulls before. They wipe out these Skrulls and they return to the New Orleans checkpoint, offering the cows as tribute.
Yeah, when's the last time you had a hamburger? Okay, that's what I thought.
A very Awkwafina bit of animation there. A rare example where they really did try to animate the live action actors' physical mannerisms. The group runs into the group from episode 1, and we learn that this city on the sea is ruled by Baron Zemo, with John Walker as his number 2. Wyatt Russell returns to voice John Walker, but voicing Zemo is Rama Valuri, who also voiced Zemo for a few lines in X-Men '97. The city on the sea is the Raft, the floating island prison prison for super threats from Captain America Civil War, also seen in Captain America Brave New World. Civil War ended with Zemo in prison there, so apparently in the years since, he was able to overthrow the guards running the facility and took over the raft as its ruler, finally giving Helmut Zemo his title of Baron. I love how the raft is also capable of diving, as when we first saw it in Civil War, it was rising up out of the ocean. The raft has an abundance of food, it seems, including a deep fryer if they have French fries. Yelena dumps a bunch of hot sauce on her food. We're reminded of her sriracha mac and cheese from Hawkeye. We get some relationship building here. Blade doesn't eat, but says he does not consume blood. Yelena seems to be into Shang-Chi. Jimmy Woo does some of the close-up magic that Scott Lang inspired him to do in Ant-Man and the Wasp. We learn that Kamala's group is headed for New Asgard, where they say there's a spacecraft. Now, New Asgard was the name of the colony that the Asgardians settled on in Avengers Endgame and in Thor Love and Thunder. They set it up in Tonsberg, Norway. They drink a lot of beer. They have some goat boats with Thanos ice cream. You know, it's fun. But we will see a different version of New Asgard in episode 3. It is just interesting that these Asgardian refugees still went to Earth after Thanos and the Black Order killed half the people on the Statesmen, and then shortly after Earth was overrun by zombies, and they're like, nah, we're good to stay here. Theoretically, the Statesmen could have gone to any other planet for a refuge. I'll get into this more in a bit. Under the raft, the people of Tlalocan, now zombified and seen gnawing on the bones of a blue whale, pound the hull of the raft. I suppose that's why they had the raft taking off from New Orleans, because it means it would be passing through the Caribbean Sea past Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, which is near where Tlalocan is located. Like if they left from like Boston or Baltimore or something like that, they would go across the Atlantic and not past Tlalocan. If you want Namor in the story, it's got to be from somewhere in the Gulf. But then with the New Orleans checkpoint wrecked, Okoye stands at the docks, and the Queen of the Dead's whispers sink into the ocean depths to reach zombie Namor on his throne. Kamala has another dream, and this time sees the radiation blast of the Infinity Stones and the anchor holding them down, which we'll learn more about in episode 3. Zombie Wanda is once again behind her, so we know she's connected to this. The raft bumps, and Jimmy Woo screams, "Iceberg!" assuming it's a Titanic situation, even though they are way underneath the surface of the water where any icebergs would be floating. Turns out the reason Alexei and the others were fed as much as they were was to fatten them up for when the Tlalocanil would arrive to flush out these guests to feed these zombies as tribute. I have to assume that these prison cells were actually designed to open up to the ocean water like this as a security measure to threaten these super prisoners back when Thaddeus Ross was running the facility, and I love that that was probably the case. Like the whole time that Scott Lang was sitting in there saying, never trust a Stark, he's like, please don't open, please don't open, please don't open. This also sets up the recurring warning these heroes will face in episode 3, that there really is no such thing as a free lunch. Kamala, Yelena, Alexei, and Blade Knight initially get flushed out, but Kamala projects a hard light sphere around them with an air pocket. Zombie Namor finds that sphere and rams it back into the raft. Zemo and Walker trap Namor in an inner containment cell. Also, I do love the detail that Blade is one to recognize Namor as having the power of Khonshu. All the gods and people who are avatars for gods kind of just recognize each other. Other zombie Tlalocanil spill into the raft. We see the heroes mix their powers as they tear them apart. I can't really show you it, but at one point Alexei just squeezes one of their heads between his hands and smushes it into purple goo, and an eyeball pops out. Alexei's always just the most fun to watch here.
You've got this, my daughter.
Die, die, die!
They flee into the life pods as water floods the raft, and they chase Nemo and Walker down their tunnel. Namor breaks out and pushes Kamala's hard light shield, using the little flapping wings on his ankles to propel himself. I also love seeing Katie and Shang-Chi on the other side extending their rings as little propeller gears to try to push back against Namor, but it doesn't work. Namor spills into the room with all of them and savagely rips through half of them, including John Walker, and then Denise and Rick and Sandra. Kamala finally stops him by shoving her hard light fist into his mouth, and then the others hold him back as she embiggens her fist into a giant mace and explodes open his skull. Yelena gets the light pod open, but the other Tlalocanil have blocked her path, so she has to go down with the ship. She pours herself some of the booze that Zemo drank earlier and pours one out for her fallen friends, and the ocean water floods in. On to episode 3. I gotta say, this episode's prologue feels like it might have originally been storyboarded to be the prologue of this second season, at least in part, because it picks up directly with the ending of that What If Season 1 Episode 5. This sequence is all narrated by Peter Parker, voiced by Hudson Thames, who also voiced Peter in the What If episode and in Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. And it seems like the reason they have him voicing this over and maybe even push it to the later episode instead of the first one is because they decided not to have a different voice actor come in to voice T'Challa here. And I'll say to that, it's not the best look to have Hudson Thames quoting T'Challa's last words of Wakanda Forever.
I heard T'Challa say, Wakanda forever, quietly. Like Like he knew that it was the last time.
Look, Marvel, in this case, a vocal recast just for this would not have been that big of a deal. Another reason why I think this is gonna be the season's opening, as their Quinjet flies over the zombified Wakandans, we see the Watcher observing in the sky in the background. Normally, he shows up early on in key establishing shots. In this case, he is doing nothing. Like, my man, help them. So yes, the Watcher cameo and the fact that in episode 1, Melena refers to the Wakandan incident with no one asking, what's a Wakandan incident? As if the script kind of expected us all to know at that point what she was talking about. Peter recounts the tale of how T'Challa attacked after seeing what Thanos did to his country. Even though T'Challa lost a leg from Vision at Camp Lehigh, the way he lands in this crouch pose always looks so cool and balanced. Similar to the Avengers circling Thanos with attacks on Titan and Infinity War, these three really try their best. I love how Scott can only do so much. It basically just flies his head around with a cloak of levitation in order to give Peter Parker a boost to whip onto. Peter tries to string up Thanos, but zombie Thanos rages as he cannot focus his power initially and explodes outward using a blast of the blue space stone. And then we see zombie Thanos starting to figure it out, using the red reality stone to sever a rock in half, and then the green time stone to do a localized time reversion on that rock to make it whole again, similar to Doctor Strange using the time stone to bite and to unbite an apple in the 2016 Doctor Strange movie. Then Thor arrives with Rocket and Teenage Groot through the Bifrost at the exact time the three arrived in the Battle of Wakanda in Avengers Infinity War. Thor once again makes the mistake of not going for the head with Stormbreaker into Thanos' chest. Thanos then hits them with a Power Stone blast that vaporizes Groot and reduces Rocket to a skeleton, though I was curious why there didn't seem to be any cybernetic implants on Rocket's skeleton there, because his backbone was augmented in order to make him a bipedal animal. Thanos rips open the earth, and we learn that there was apparently a molten vibranium reactor core beneath Wakanda's Golden City. That's new information. Now we know that there were mines of solid vibranium rock beneath Mount Bashanga, but now it establishes this is a more explosive situation. Peter tosses T'Challa the Mind Stone. Yeah, we're hearing those really cool female vocalizations that Ryan Coogler and Ludwig Göransson included in some key Dora Milaje moments in the Black Panther score. I just love all this music as T'Challa wallops zombie Thanos, but in this exchange, Thanos gets the upper hand when he uses a space stone to teleport the Mind Stone back to him and completes the set. So Black Panther has to tackle Thanos into the vibranium reactor core, and the combined radiation from the Infinity Stones causes an explosive release that warps the fabric of reality. They all nearly die, but the sling ring portals open, bringing Peter and Scott to Kamar-Taj. Now, since Doctor Strange and Wong are dead in this universe, Kamar-Taj is now operated by the other sorcerers we saw there in 2022's Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, including Rintrah, the Green Minotaur, voiced by Adam Hugel, who voiced Rintrah in that movie, and then Sarah Wolf, voiced by Sheila Atim, who played Sarah in that movie, and then the London Master, voiced by Daniel Swain, who played the London Master in that movie. And I like that their biggest concern in the 2022 film was the Scarlet Witch, and now in this universe, they're dealing with another Scarlet Witch issue. We learn that the Queen of the Dead, or the Red Queen, as she's also called in this miniseries, is marching on Paris with her horde. Meanwhile, the group from the raft makes it to the shores of New Asgard, but the New Asgard of this universe is not the picturesque hills of Tonsberg, Norway that became the New Asgard settlement in Avengers Endgame, but might be because they had to build this New Asgard as like a sunless dungeon in the walls of these cliffs to avoid zombies getting in. Valkyrie greets them above the door, Tessa Thompson returning to voice the character. She turns them away from the feast happening inside and tells them that this place is for gods only. Now, Blade Knight summons his divine passenger.
I am the moon god Khonshu. Has the world changed so much that the Asgardians no longer recognize my deity?
Ha! F. Murray Abraham returns to voice Khonshu here. I love his epic mystical appearance of Khonshu's wrappings flapping behind him like some Lovecraftian squid monster. Meanwhile, he's still invisible to the mortals. Blade warns.
And don't touch anything.
Another example of Blade Knight having some Bladey sense. Like Khonshu has alerted him that something's off about what's going to be inside these halls. Magic can always sense other magic. They pass through the initial halls where there are massive statues of past Asgardian kings, including Odin with his one eye. Shang-Chi calls out Valkyrie for hiding, but really I just think it's weird that all these demigods capable of space travel decided to stay on this virus-plagued planet at all. It's like having the option to retire on any island in the world, and instead just choosing to shelter in place on the one island in the world with COVID. Like, what are they doing? Now, the revels in the next chamber show a huge gathering of Asgardian warriors feasting and drinking and punching each other and fighting with swords. There are way more big bearded dudes than there seemed to be in the refugees of Asgard when they fled after Ragnarok and were on the Statesman. Like, that seemed to be mostly women and children, but maybe some of those teenage boys grew up in the past 5 years. Like, I have to imagine Asgardian boys probably grow full beards and are jacked at age 12. When you see the Asgardians drinking wine from the barrel, it's a dark red wine color, and it's crazy to think that this dude's guzzling blood. All the guys burping as they gnaw on the turkey legs are, of course, them chewing on zombified limbs. Kamala wants to talk to Thor, who sits on his throne, silent and sulking, his face scarred from the Wakandan incident. He reminds me of Theoden from the Two Towers, whose golden hall was also secretly under an illusion. Valkyrie says the Queen of Sokovia provided the food for the bounty.
Sokovia has no queen.
Yeah, of course, Zemo would feel bitter about that. His home country of Sokovia was destroyed in the Ultron battle in Avengers Age of Ultron, but of course, Wanda Maximoff did come from Sokovia. And Wanda Maximoff steps forward, now looking as Wanda did in her Phase 3 titles with those fun gloves, voiced by Elizabeth Olsen. She says,
I was infected. That is true.
What? Wait, how did you...
Over time, I found a way to focus my powers and control my thoughts and myself. I regained my ability to sculpt reality.
You healed yourself?
I gotta say, it's pretty exciting that this Wanda gained a more confident control over her reality warping powers that seemed to be overwhelming for her and not fully in her control in WandaVision. Wanda says she needs soldiers with the powers of gods to take Anchor Hulk's power, so that's why she needed the Asgardians to be zombies that she could control, and why it would also help to have this particular band of superheroes. Wanda reveals that she pulled a Scott Tenorman. The cake was a zombie head, the bread was a zombie arm, the turkey was a zombie rib cage, the meatballs were eyeballs, and this cake surrounded by fruit was just a decorative brain surrounded by decorative fingers that I guess Wanda also placed very carefully. I mean, Wanda could have waited to reveal all of this until after the Asgardians turned into zombies, but she does it when they're still just kind of coughing and confused, which feels extra mean for their final moments. Alexi's turkey leg was an arm that he bit a lot of the fingies off of, but I have to ask, why did Blade Knight stop Jimmy Woo from eating, but not stop Alexi? Does Blade hate Alexi? Do Blade and Khonshu know that in situations like these, big old dummies like Alexi, when they grieve their loved ones, are more likely to be liabilities than they are assets, and thus better off letting die? I mean, that was definitely the case for Peter Quill in Avengers Infinity War when he punched Thanos out of his trance because he was grieving Gamora so much. I do just find it really funny how later on in the scene, when Kamala is holding Alexi when they get back to the ship, Shang-Chi and Katie send back their rings to help her, but Blade is like, no, and he just runs onto the ship, even though Valkyrie totally would not need Blade's help to start or pilot the ship. Blade could have stayed behind to help them, and he's like, no, f Alexi. Something Alexi did rubbed Blade the wrong way. Zemo gets impaled from behind. Kamala saves a seated Thor from approaching zombies that he was just ready to let take him. Death Dealer saves Jimmy Woo, but then gets his arm and leg broken by an Asgardian zombie who then smashes him to the floor. R.I.P. Death Dealer. Then Jimmy Woo gets gobbled up. Shang-Chi sees him from behind the dog pile, and at one point we just see Jimmy's screaming head flying up. I gotta say though, it is endlessly fun to watch Blade Knight during this escape as they all run down the steps. He's like, hey guys, watch this. And he activates his Moon Knight powers to just leap down the pit. Valkyrie's spaceship looks like the Commodore. That's the Grandmaster's ship from Thor Ragnarok, which is probably the ship she continued to pilot as the Asgardians left Asgard on the Statesman in Ragnarok. Alexi turns into a zombie and Kamala tearfully leaves him behind. Valkyrie tries to launch a Commodore, but Wanda holds it back, having reverted to her true zombified form.
Kamala, the hope you seek is down here with me. There is no salvation in the stars. We can heal the world.
It's almost like Wanda knows the importance of the phrase, what you seek is seeking you, to Kamala. But then they send some static electricity in their hair, like the lightning storm effect that accompanied Thor in Thor Ragnarok whenever he was charged up like this. Thor lands before the Commodore and attacks Wanda, and I like for a second you can see her go, and she gets electrocuted. She slams him into the cavern ceiling, but then he fights back and both fall together, like Gandalf and the Balrog in the opening of Two Towers. That's two Towers references there. Thor, voiced in this episode by Greg Furman, tells Kamala,
you're the Avenger now. Now go.
It's kind of like when Tony Stark knights Peter Parker in Infinity War, but in this case, very tragic. They do make it to space, and they bypass the radiation from the Wakanda event and reach a point where they can use the transmitter to summon the Nova Corps. Kamala isn't sure which yellow button to push.
It's the yellow one.
This yellow one?
No.
Oh, that one right there?
The other yellow one.
Since this is the dashboard of the Commodore, it does kind of remind us of that funny moment when Bruce Banner was in the passenger seat beside Valkyrie trying to figure out which button to push to activate the ship's weapons in Ragnarok, but turned on the "It's my birthday" skip button. We realize the Nova Corps was already there.
Attention craft. Return to your world. It has been quarantined by the Nova Corps.
Quarantined?
Your world has been declared condemned. Any attempt to flee the planet will be met with incineration.
Again, I don't really know how the Nova Corps fleet would still be in this decent of shape if Thanos got the Power Stone from Xandar, but maybe for him it was just a very quick smash and grab blitzkrieg that didn't leave the whole fleet in ruin. On to episode 4. One of the satellites that's still in space gets wrecked as the Nova Corps aggressively runs down the Commodore, which tells us that there are still some satellites in the Earth's orbit. Maybe that's what Riri used to hack the signal that she references in the final scene. I mean, for the Nova Corps to take the quantum virus quarantine this seriously, it suggests that there might have been similar pandemics in the galaxy before that the Nova Corps had been forced to quarantine. Makes me wonder if they maybe tried to contain annihilists like this in the past. Kamala tries to plug the holes with her hard light, and then when the Commodore breaks apart and explodes, she just contains all of them in a hard light bubble. In an uncontrolled dive, Valkyrie asks,
I wonder if this is considered dying in battle.
She's asking because Asgardian warriors, if they die in battle, get sent to Valhalla when they die, like Jane Foster and Odin were. As Blade Knight falls, he doesn't at all panic. He just kind of aura farms, still crossing his arms. I suppose he's just confident enough at this point that Khonshu is going to pull some strings to bail him out. But it's not Khonshu. They're all collected by sling ring portals. Kamala finally meets Peter Parker.
Spider-Man, I can't believe. Did you just save us?
With Zeb Wells writing this, I think some viewers who had read the comics were a bit afraid of what would happen to Kamala here, considering the recent comic storyline written by Zeb Wells. But thankfully, Kamala ends up being the sole survivor of this story. I really like the detail that since this is 5 years later, Peter does seem to be a bit older. He's certainly taller than he was in that What If episode. We see Wanda's forces appearing in the mists over the water, carried in a fleet of Asgardian Viking boats. I love this visual. The sorcerers catch up the others on what happened in the Wakanda event. The infinity energy surged across the planet, consuming the pyramids of Giza, the Roman Colosseum, and the Eiffel Tower. But then we learn how the sorcerer sent Bruce Banner through a sling ring portal to Paris, arming him with eldritch runes on his face, and Hulk absorbed all of that radiation. Remember, in Avengers Endgame, Smart Hulk said that his powers came from radiation that affected his blood, and that radiation was gamma, the same kind of radiation that's emitted by the Infinity Stones. So because of that, he was able to withstand a blast of holding all the 6 stones and snapping them. So since Hulk just gets angrier and angrier with the more power and energy directed at him, technically he could take more and more surges from these stones, approaching infinity with no end. But in this case, perhaps thanks to the Sorcerer Ruins, for Banner, this just results in him going into a meditative Zen state. So that's why we never saw what happened to Hulk when he fought Zombie Wanda at Camp Lehigh in that What If episode. It must have been a draw between them, and then the surviving sorcerers found Banner. It is interesting, by the way, that all this is happening in the ruins of Paris. Like, that was Paris that they're on the ashes of. The whole final battle is over the ruins of the Champs-Elysees. They say that Bruce is no longer Bruce for the Hulk.
He's a cipher. He's now an anchor, protecting energies that could make or destroy worlds. Protecting us.
Anchor is an interesting choice of words. The term anchor point was first used in a What If episode in season 1, but now as we approach Avengers Doomsday, we're all very focused on finding the anchor beings, a term introduced in Deadpool and Wolverine, referring to the individuals in each universe whose deaths trigger the deaths of that universe. It seems like in this zombie universe, Bruce Banner either is or becomes the anchor being, which is fitting because in What If season 1 episode 5, it really started with Bruce, but maybe we're seeing a conflict where Wanda is trying to usurp the power of becoming the anchor being of the animated universe. Really, Hulk and Wanda, I would say, seem to be the characters Brian Andrews likes the best. They decide to join Peter and Scott and the Sorcerers to protect Infinity Hulk, that's what I'm gonna call him now, from Wanda's forces. The battle begins. Wanda's first wave are the Foot Soldiers and Abomination and some giant zombies from San Francisco. Infinity Hulk wallops Abomination with a sonic boom punch that clears a lot of the field. I would have loved to have seen at least a few thunderclaps here, but you know, they did say he's no longer Hulk, technically. The way the Infinity energy radiates off of him looks like black Kirby dots that we've seen in What If animation before. It's a really cool way of showing the inky texture of reality itself coming apart at the seams. Wanda's next wave is to levitate the flooded raft prison over Hulk, dumping the ocean water over him, along with all the other people they infected, which tells us that, zombie Elena's probably in the mix here. Now the giant zombies pound on him like synchronized workers hammering a nail in for a train line. Infinity Hulk slices through them. Now the Asgardians are unleashed. Whereas before their bladed weapons glowed blue, now under Wanda's control, they're tinted red. She opens fire from their Viking ships. Wanda tries to ease Infinity Hulk from his burden, but the survivors come to his aid, jumping out of sling ring portals like the Avengers Assemble moment from Endgame. While it seems like they took their sweet ass time getting there, arguably it made more sense to allow Infinity Hulk to clear the majority of the foot soldiers that he'd have an easier time with, and then they could come in as his second wave. They all charge, and when Blade Knight leaps in, we hear what I think is like a classic anime sound effect. And then he moves his sword in front of his face, and we see Khonshu reflected. I love that shot. Rintrah impales zombies with his horns. Spider-Man acrobatically leaps and webs dozens of heads and yanks out the spines. Sarah uses that old portal trick of redirecting the Viking boat blast upon the ships themselves. Zombie Hawkeye belches. Tiny zombie Hank Pym and tiny zombie Janet Van Dyne, patients 0 and 1 for this quantum virus. And it reminds me of Clint in Civil War being the one to unleash tiny Ant-Man on his arrow. Scott yells to the London Master, "Watch out! On your left!" The famous exchange among the Captains America. Now, the attack spells of the London Master shouts are actually Scottish Gaelic phrases, which is pretty fun since he's from the UK. His sorcery would be rooted in these traditions. These phrases translate to, "Come on, eat my blade," and then "That's your head exploding," and then "Die one more time." Zombie Hank Pym leaps through all of Shang-Chi's 10 rings. Blade tries to stomp him, but then Hank grows to giant size. Spider-Man makes him punch himself as he says, "Stop hitting yourself." It's kind of crazy to think that this is supposed to be Michael Douglas. Similarly, it's pretty nuts to think that it's Michelle Pfeiffer when zombie Janet Van Dyne punches Valkyrie, and then Valkyrie scarab beetles up her arm tissue and then pops the head of the legendary actress. This is kind of like how evil Hank Pym killed Hulk in What If Episode 3 by enlarging and accelerating his heart and popping him from the inside out. And then in a daze, giant zombie Hank goes small again, bounces off of Scott's dome, and Blade Knight with perfect precision slices the multiple Oscar-winning son of Kirk Douglas cleanly in half. I love how throughout these episodes, Wanda, despite her methods being evil and deceptive, does make a solid case for why Kamala should just let her win. Since so many of these zombies that are being destroyed were once kind-hearted Avengers, wouldn't it just be better to let a reality warper start everything over with a clean slate? Now all of the Fallen come back. Alexei, Yelena, Milena, the other widows. Then really upsetting Peter and Scott, giant zombie Hope Van Dyne from Camp Lehigh from that What If episode. And then for Shang-Chi and Katie, they have to see reassembled corpses of Jimmy Woo and Death Dealer. And then vaporizing Sarah and London Master, zombie Thor, who now sizzles with red lightning instead of blue. Zombie Okoye fights Valkyrie. Blade Knight tries to strike at zombie Thor, but then gets vaporized too. You know, with his dying breath, he's like, "F Alexei. Hey, where were you there, Khonshu?" Infinity Hulk fights zombie Thor, who tries to belch some of that Scarlet Witch lightning on his face, but Hulk defeats him with just a powerful stomp. All the warriors start to go down. For Peter, it looks like he's about to get eaten by giant zombie Hope. You really can't eat Hope, but she can eat you. So as all this carnage and despair flashes through Kamala's eyes, she decides to surrender. And as Wanda absorbs the Infinity Hulk's energy, Kamala joins her hand and shares her hard light with the Red Witch. So why does it need to be Kamala's powers that Wanda requires to complete this process? Is there some secret power from the Noor dimension? Is it just another case of these What If animators just combining all the power sets and like their kids smushing toys together in a sandbox? Or could it just be, as we saw in the Marvels, the Bangles do have a unique ability to tear the fabric of space-time. In Dar-Ben's case, that tore a rift open to the X-Men universe. It seems to be what Wanda is doing as she says this.
And so the world begins again.
Yeah, doesn't that seem to be a House of M reset there? A radiation field that looks like a mixture of Wanda's hex powers as it spread out from Westview at the end of episode 6 of WandaVision. Now it's cast in the shape and color of Kamala's fuchsia hard light and encases the entire planet so that the Nova Corps ships observe it from space wondering, the f is going on? Now Kamala wakes up from this like it's a dream, hearing her mother Muniba's voice downstairs. On Kamala's bedroom wall are posters of Iron Man and Black Widow, but none for Carol Danvers. It's because Kamala doesn't know who that is. Already a clue that this reality is off, because zombie Wanda would have never known how big of a star Captain Marvel was for teenage Kamala. Riri and Kate are alive once more. They go get some boba tea, and Kamala wears that same green jacket with the Avengers insignia that she wore throughout the Marvel series, specifically specifically to Avengers Con. Already, it's kind of unusual that Kamala would even have these other two as her friends in a non-zombie reality, because it wasn't until the events of the Marvels that brought Kamala to Kate Bishop in that movie's post-credit scene. Actually, when I interviewed Iman Vellani, she did indicate that there was going to be a version of that scene that would have had another young Avenger in there, or at least reference, and now I'm assuming that that other one would have been Riri Williams. But really, in this universe, it seems like it was the zombie outbreak that brought these three together. Like, what we're seeing now is not any kind of normal base reality that Kamala would have been returning to. Across the street is the Circle Q store that Bruno worked at in the Ms. Marvel series. Kamala sees Cameron that she had the hots for in that show, but as Kamala says, nom 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 nom, she flashes to the reality this actually still is, zombies. Ironic that she was saying nom 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 nom, because that's what zombies do, they nom 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 nom. All around her are They Live style flashes of the zombie reality beneath Wanda's smokescreen, and then she sees Riri still alive.
Kamala, can you hear me? Kamala, I've hacked the thing. Don't believe what it is all fake. Kamala, it's not real.
So confirmed, Riri Williams did not die in episode 1. She totally survived, and it looks like she mounted an armored blaster, Mega Man style, on her arm as a kind of tourniquet to stop the zombie infection. A detail that I really love because it's just like Tony Stark. Remember, he put that arc reactor in his chest as a way to augment his body with technology so that he could magnetize the shrapnel from infecting his heart and killing him. And if you listen closely, Riri did say she hacked the signal.
Kamala, I've hacked the thing.
So what signal did Riri hack? Where is Kamala right now in actuality? Well, in WandaVision, we learned that Wanda Maximoff's illusion magic manifests in the form of what's called CMBR, cosmic microwave background radiation, which was a kind of electromagnetic frequency that trapped the people in Westview in a televised illusion. But it was a signal that could be hacked through technological means. That seems to be what Riri is doing here. So when Melina challenged Okoye with magic versus science, we are now seeing Riri's science make a comeback. But remember, the Ironheart series was also all about the intersection of magic and science. So it's also possible that this version of Riri might have made a deal with Mephisto, like her live action counterpart did. I mean, these What If Marvel Zombies animators love to make new Rockstars dreams come true. You could do that in season 2, Brian Andrews. So where is Kamala? Well, I think Wanda might have her in Westview, New Jersey, which would not be that far from Jersey City. It looks like Wanda did not actually warp the zombie reality. She's probably keeping it as is, but just keeping it as an apocalypse with her in power, using Kamala's Bengal power to, I guess, reinforce that strength in some way. And it looks like she's trapping Kamala in a kind of House of M Matrix simulation scenario to make her think all is well. I mean, it's just cool that we finally get to see a Scarlet Witch enact a House of M scenario in any one of these titles, like warping reality in a specific way, but we're questioning the reality itself. Instead of no more mutants, it seems it was no more zombies. But again, as with House of M, it's actually more complicated than that. I love the way this season ends by making us even question what's real and which reality we would prefer. It's kind of the did we really win paranoia that we thought Quantumania was ending with. But in this case, it's all a real horrific paranoia for Kamala Khan.
Kamala, are you good?
We are seeing the Scarlet Witch at her most powerful, not just as a reality warper, but as a witch who leaves you never quite certain what reality you are in. Comment down below with your thoughts, and a special thanks to one of our YouTube members, Paulo Bianca, for supporting us at the executive producer level. Follow me at EA Voss and subscribe to all the channels in the New Rockstars Network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Happy Halloween!